Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Friday, which means it's time for a new How to Bass tutorial. And today, I'm going to show you how to make this sound. It's all kinds of fun. Before we get there, I want to mention that today's video is sponsored. How neat is that? Today's video is sponsored by Backblaze, which is an online backup service. It's pretty neat, pretty fast. It's $5 per month per computer, and when we get to the end of the video, I'll actually talk more in depth about that. If you're in a hurry for some reason, you can go to the description of this video, and there's a link to a no-risk trial that you can do courtesy of Backblaze. Anyway, this sound. So this sound is born of experiences I had while I was doing the hardstyle track from scratch. And that track, I experimented doing some sort of sound effecty sort of background sounds by doing band passing over something before distortion. So I decided that I wanted to experiment with doing that with Harmor. I am actually using external distortion. I'm using the wave shaper, and I'm doing some hardstyle-ish stuff with it. And that is the fact that I'm using asymmetrical distortion, which you might be thinking, well, that's not hardstyle stuff, that's just asymmetrical distortion. It's gonna forever be linked in my mind as being a hardstyle thing, because while I did know about it, I really didn't use it for anything until that came around. The funny thing about the distortion, we'll talk about what's going on in the Harmor in a second, but the funny thing about the distortion is that this asymmetrical distortion is symmetrical. The shapes that I'm using are identical to each other, which is a little silly. You might be thinking, well, what's the point of doing that otherwise? And as it turns out, the reason I'm doing that is because just by the fact that it's processing both, doesn't matter if they're attempting to do the same thing, just by doing that by itself, it creates this slight breakage in the sound. As you can hear when I mess with it. And that breakage is what I'm after. You can get more fancy by doing actual different things with different shapes, and the whole point. If you don't know what asymmetrical distortion is, basically the idea is that wave shaping, regular old wave shaping, applies itself evenly to the positive and negative polarity of a waveform's oscillation. And you see how the switch here is, it says positive and positive negative. It's asymmetrical, but it's also called bipolar mode. And this is to say that, like, while this shape is activated on both sides, this shape is activated on either side as well, but you can also independently mess with it so that you are changing the distortion intensity for the positive and the negative oscillation, which can cause some very interesting things. I'm actually not doing anything super interesting with the current distortion, but like I said, despite the fact of having it on, causes that little tiny bit of breakage that I wanted, and I enjoy what the sound is doing. It's hard to notice the breakage, and like this is the reason why I'm doing it after the other distortion. This is already a pretty big distortion, and doing that again forces it to go in pretty hard. And I have the pre-gain up pretty high on both of these, which is causing extra things. Now, in the Harmor is actually very, very, very simple. I have the ramping almost off, but it's not completely off, and for the most part, everything else is the same, and it's just a regular saw wave. I'm not doing really anything harmonically except for what I'm doing with the filter. The reason why I wanted to use Harmor for this is because regular bandpass filters, regular equalizers, operate on a kind of processing called minimum phase. And minimum phase causes what's known as phase distortion. And this is what happens when you move a filter so fast you hear it start to change the pitch of something. That's because in order to filter something, you have to change the phase of the frequencies as you're moving it up and down for it to attenuate or not attenuate otherwise, to include some and not others. And that whole thing is really actually a very intelligent process. Problem with that is that if you move it too fast, you start to change the phase. I mean, you're changing the phase in real time, which if you've watched any of my videos on FM, you know that changing phase is essentially changing pitch. So, while it's playing anyway. So, why does this matter? Well, there's another kind of filtering and EQing and whatever called linear phase. And linear phase is when it does not do that. It doesn't change the phase. It does, but it does it cleanly in a way that it introduces some latency, but it's also a much cleaner impact on what's happening. The reason why I'm doing this with Harmor now is because Harmor's processing is a per harmonic thing. And when you're doing the filtering, an additive process, what we're saying here is that we're not actually changing anything in post. We're doing this by stopping certain harmonics from turning on and telling others to turn off while we're moving the thing around. So as each individual harmonic is concerned, it's in its own universe. It's not interacting with anything before or after it, which means that since they're all essentially by themselves and not interacting with anything, there's no phase consideration whatsoever. It's just on-off. It's not a big deal. I'm not using the actual bandpass shape, however. I am using a custom shape, but I have made this really sharp box thing here. You can kind of see, you saw me messing around with the width. What the width is changing is that it's essentially changing how this box is being applied to the harmonics. You can kind of flip it over, and then that puts it over on what's going on the harmonics. So as I make it wider, it has a larger range, that kind of thing. It would be more obvious if I did something like, say, this. The frequency moves around the shape, and then the width changes how wide the shape's application is on the system of harmonics. I had this ridiculously sharp version because I wanted to be perfectly super sharp. By default, the bandpass is more like this, where it has fading in going on it and fading out and that kind of thing, which, as you may have noticed, it does not as well define sounding under such intense distortion. And also, when you move it really, really fast, it actually starts to kind of sound like an ARP, which is not unlike what's actually happening. Because if you see what's going on here, you can see that individual harmonics are turning on, and it's going up in what essentially would be an arpeggio. So that's why it sounds similar to sort of chiptuning based things when you're just playing an ARP really, really fast. It is very interesting. And then you just distort it, and that's just that. And part of the reason why I'm keeping the harmonics together like this. I'm not doing any unison, I don't have any prism, I'm not doing anything. The phase is all aligned. Everything is pretty much on point because we're doing such incredibly harsh distortion that if you change any of it, well, the sound might be neat. You know, you should experiment with that. It's not going to be as clean cut as what it sounds like when the harmonics are just aligned the way they are. It's also worth noting that I don't have the sub protection on. Although that is a neat modulation to do just there. That's because I want it to just apply on the individual harmonics. You might be thinking, well, why not? But you also might notice that even while I'm doing that, it still kind of imparts the right note, even though we're not playing anywhere near the lower harmonics that are present for the actual waveform that I have. That's just phase cancellation, and it's an interesting property of the harmonic series that no matter what part of it you're playing, it's still going to have that phase cancellation oscillation that's still relevant to the note that it's based on, which is just kind of a neat thing. Anyway, this patch will be patchable, downloadable from Google Drive that I'll link to in the description of this video, right up there with the Backblaze link, because we're sponsored by Backblaze. By we, I mean me. There's not really a we involved in this. I feel like saying we because every time I've ever seen anyone have any kind of sponsorship in any sort of video, they have been in sort of an organization and thus have been a we. That might be me eventually, but for the time being, not a we. It's a me, Mario. Anyway, let's talk about Backblaze. So Backblaze, as I mentioned, is an online backup service. Essentially, the idea is that you install their little app thing, and then it downloads anything that's yours. The user-generated data, anything you change, and uploads it automatically to their stuff. And this is so that you can keep everything together and, backed up, and that kind of thing is pretty good. Some of you are probably already familiar with the idea of why backups are good, but just in case you're not, let's talk about sort of the 3 stages of backups that you should have. The first stage is really honestly, the first stage is you have something. You have some data you want. The first backup stage is the local copy, where you copy it and you put it somewhere that's not where it already is, preferably not on the same hard drive. So it's in your system, just on a different drive. This is so that, if you have a version you control, is usually what you do when you have different versions of stuff listed there. You just keep that there, along with live versions that you're actually working on. Then the second stage is an external backup where you don't have it on the same computer and not even connected to the same computer. This is like if you have a fire safe or something, and every night you do backups on a big old external hard drive and you put that in a fire safe. This solves 2 particular problems. One problem is that, say you get a virus or whatever and your computer is infected. If you have an external hard drive connected to it, that means it's actually still vulnerable to that kind of thing, which means that having that backup wouldn't save the fact that the other backup on the system still got destroyed. And then, if you have catastrophic data loss that's in relation to some software-related issue beyond viruses, any other kind of problems that happens, generally speaking, connected drives are still kind of a problem. But if it's not even connected to the computer, then any kind of single system, internal system-based computer-related issues are prevented from being a problem. The fire safe idea is also sort of like if your house is destroyed, the name is sort of the main that it's fireproof, so that if your house burns down, you still have stuff in there that you know is still there. So even if everything is destroyed, you still have your important stuff, your important data. And then there's the off-site backup. The off-site backup is just in case, even on top of all of that, somebody steals your fire safe, because it is a fireproof, it is a safe, but it's not theft-proof, and if somebody really felt like getting at your fat beats, they can still just drill a safe. So So then the offsite backup is usually based on these kind of online services where you upload it to some data center somewhere. And so it doesn't matter if like your country gets nuked, it's not there anymore. It's somewhere else. Your data is still safe. So like this is just about, you know, being prepared and redundant on important data, which for a lot of you might think that that might not be a thing. Like even for your own projects, you might be thinking, well, even if I lost all my projects, I still might survive. And it's still kind of true. Even if you lost all your old stuff, you can still make new stuff. But imagine like all your sample libraries and that kind of thing. If you do this for long enough, you're eventually gonna just accrue an archive of an incredible amount of stuff that if you did have to start from scratch, it would be maddening. So like, and some people would end careers, and so it actually absolutely is important to keep this stuff backed up like a lot. And then if you're super diligent, you could be like BT, who has a file server in his house with everything he's ever done from day one, which is an insane amount of stuff, like 20 years plus of all of his files, all in perfect working order. It's amazing. That man is a miracle of organization. Or perhaps I'm just really bad at it. I don't know. Either way, it's a cool idea and a cool thing to be thinking about. And Backblaze is a perfectly reasonable solution to all of this. And there happens to be a link in the description of my video to a risk-free free trial where you can upload stuff for free, and then if you don't, it's not the kind of thing where like they'll start charging you for it, but then like if you decide not to get an account afterwards, they'll just delete your stuff. So there's that. Speaking of deleting stuff, though, they do have a cool thing where, you know, obviously if you need to get your stuff, you can download your things that you need. You can even access it with iOS or Android apps. But if it's like a lot of stuff, they actually have an option for them to send it to you on a hard drive. You have to pay for the hard drive, but they'll still send you all your stuff on it. So like that's pretty forward thinking. I dig that a lot. Anyway, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, it's it's $5 per month per computer. So it's based on that kind of idea, an individual workstation kind of thing. It's very content creator centric. So I feel like it's a wonderful fit for those people who watch these videos. Anyway, if you have any questions about any of this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe, all these good things, and to whitelist me on your ad block. I actually don't know if it's possible to whitelist specific YouTube channels on AdBlock, but I think it should be. If not, is it really so bad to watch ads on YouTube? I don't know. If it is, that's fine. I'm not going to like hate you forever if you don't watch ads, but I mean, I get money from that. So, and yeah, it enables me to be doing other stuff for free. So there's that kind of thing, except for the fact where I'm sponsored. I can't get over that. Yeah. And as usual, have a nice day.